Hi, I'm Donna Meltzer, CEO of Brain Injury Services located in Northern Virginia. It's March, and March means that it is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month and it's Brain Injury Awareness Month. Because of that connection, I'm so excited today to be having a conversation with Lucy Beadnell, Director of Advocacy at the ARC of Northern Virginia. Welcome, Lucy, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my treat, Donna. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you all.
Terrific. So I see we have a screen up here that shares a lot of great information about you, but why don't you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and what got you engaged in doing advocacy work on behalf of people with developmental and other disabilities?
Sure, that would be my pleasure. When I was 7 years old, I lost my purse in a fast food restaurant that I liked to frequent with my mom, and it was returned to me by a woman with a developmental disability. And when she brought my bag back, I, as an inquisitive child, had a million questions for my mom about why did she speak a little differently than other people, what was going on here, and it led to a very long conversation over nuggets about developmental disabilities and how important employment was and how incredible it was that this woman had a job. I mean, this was the 80s, right? It was a very different time in disability services, and it really opened my eyes. And my mom talked about the challenges it was as a person with a disability to get included, in different words, for the time. And I just said, okay, then why don't we work on fixing this? And I maybe bit off more than I could chew, but I was bought in at that point. Uh, and so throughout my life, when there were opportunities to volunteer and work with ARCs and other disability groups, I loved it. And then I ended up getting degrees in school focused on policy, disadvantaged groups, women's, people with disabilities, children, refugees, etc. And as I was finishing up school, I drove by the ARC of Northern Virginia back in 2008 and thought, that's where I've loved volunteering before. I wonder if this ARC needs a volunteer. And they can't seem to shake me. So it has been my pleasure to put sort of this longstanding personal passion to use. And I have to say, I feel like I'm one of the very many people in this field who gets into it and then later realizes they have disabilities. Their family members have disabilities, right? If we are fortunate enough to live long enough, this is all of our communities in the big disability umbrella. And so a lot of my work is focused on developmental disabilities in specific, but I try really hard and make sure we're taking a broad view because really at the end of the day, we all need the same things. How do we all get a safe and affordable and inclusive place to live and to work and to be a part of our community? And so it really has just become not only a professional mission, but a personal one as my family has evolved.
I think that's such a great story. I think we all have a story, you're right, about how we came into this field. Most of us, maybe by a fluke chance, we either saw somebody in McDonald's or we
Yeah.
had a family member or we chose to work on Capitol Hill and happened to work for a member of Congress who has a disability. That would be my story. But there's so many ways we come to it, and you're right, it changes our lives in so many ways. I too had no direct connection when I first got involved, but later on had a child who has some disabilities. And of course, as we get older and our parents age, we see it in our parents, we see it in other
It's
family
everywhere.
members and friends. And so I will certainly say that having a steeped background in disabilities has never served me wrong. It's only been right.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit, since you took us up to, you landed at the ARC of Northern Virginia. Tell us a little bit about the ARC of Northern Virginia, some of your priorities there. I'm quite familiar with the ARC of the US and getting to know the ARC of Northern Virginia. So just tell us a little bit about maybe how they're different, the national, the state, the locals. What does that mean for the people you serve?
Yeah, it's a great question. And though I love working at ARCs, I'll say it can be a little bit confusing or counterintuitive for folks to navigate initially. So, all ARCs across the country, and there are more than 600, have the same fundamental mission. And it really is two parts: promoting and protecting human and civil rights for people with disabilities, community access, voting access, rights to live in the community, those kinds of things, And the second piece is actively working to support the services and funding that make those rights work. It's one thing to say you have the right to live in this apartment building, but it's a different thing to say, we know that only works if you have a housing voucher and you have a live-in caregiver and you've got the supports you need and you've got a case manager, right? And you've got all the things it takes to make you as independent and successful as possible and to build a broader community. So with that said, the way the very many different ARC chapters that are all separate 501c3 nonprofits tackle that mission varies. And one of the things I've always loved is we say ARCs are supposed to be born of their community and do what's missing there. In Northern Virginia, we have a really incredible network of developmental disability service providers who offer a range of residential and employment and drop-in supports and things. We don't need to run that. So a lot of what we do at the ARC of Northern Virginia is advocacy. How do we use the voices of our community to change laws, regulations, budgets, all kinds of policies to make sure we're meeting our mission and creating a better community? And a lot of what we do is also information and referral. I joke that we're there for the ungoogleable, right? All of those complex, counterintuitive, illogical rules about disability benefits and the melding of public and private services. No matter how smart you are, you're just not going to figure it out.
Right. It's
Wiggling
kind of
your way
a
through the
language
internet.
all its own, isn't it?
It is. It's such a different world to navigate. And so a lot of the ways people first come in contact to us are asking those questions. I was told you might be able to help me figure this out, and it just seems impossible. How do we get there?
That's fantastic. I'm an advocacy person at heart as well. That's my background, and so I completely relate to your mission and what you're doing. And I want to dig in a little bit more, both about what we're doing around advocacy right now at the national level and the local level. Let's local though. We have recently wrapped up the General Assembly work for this session. I know you guys, along with us at BIS, had a lot of asks out there this year. Tell me a little bit about what were some of the big asks that the ARC had? What success are you seeing so far? I know today's an important date on the calendar. Today's the day by which we're hoping the governor is going to come back with some good news about the budget. I know we're all sitting on pins and needles waiting for that, but tell me more about your work, what you have led, and what you're hoping to see from the GA this year.
Sure. So I love that we started this conversation by talking about sort of our dual focus on information and referral and advocacy, because the things for which we advocate come directly from those questions we get from families, right? And by being in touch with what's impacting families on a day-to-day level, we can better focus our advocacy on where the needs are greatest. And so this year was a year, I would say, kind of highs and lows for people who follow Virginia's General Assembly at all. It works in 2-year cycles driven by the budget. And so in even numbered years like last year, we have a slightly longer session. And in odd numbered years like this one, we're just amending the second half of a 2-year budget and have less time to make law changes. So as a result, the legislative and funding asks tend to be smaller in these shorter years, right? We've got a shorter period of time to do it. So I struggle with that as the kind of person who wants to say, let's talk about everything, reach for everything. But it was a year where we had some good strategic asks and some victories. So let's talk through some examples of those. On the funding side, one of the biggest wins were for Medicaid waiver. That's the long-term care funding program that helps keep people in their home and out of institutions. I would say the keystone service is a good support coordinator, a case manager who can help you know what's out there in and outside of the waiver program. How do we wrap services and supports around you to build a good life? And one of the struggles we've seen is lots of turnover in that field. And the institutional knowledge is invaluable in that position, knowing how things really get approved, where the right provider is for someone, because you've seen it over years and you've seen them stick by folks. And so one of the big budget wins this year was more funding for those support coordinators who we know we've got to keep in those jobs. I'm really excited about that. We're, like I mentioned, in the second year of a 2-year budget. So one of our other priorities was holding fast on a commitment Virginia had made last year. When we talk about that Medicaid waiver system to bring caregivers into your home and other settings, we know it's critical, but we have a long waiting list. In Virginia, it's still over 15,000 people waiting for that level of care. And in 2024, Governor Youngkin put in his budget, and the Virginia General Assembly passed funding for anyone in crisis, called Priority One, of that waiting list. And this year, in what we knew was going to be a tough budget environment, we were concerned that there would be pushback on funding some of those waiver services. So in my mind, holding the line, making sure that that group of 3,440 people, every single one counts, who is planned to get waiver services still gets them, is a big victory. I'm really excited about that. And one of my favorite policy wins this year came from conversations with Rev Up Virginia, a disability, kind of cross disability, cross state advocacy coalition, who realized that we were seeing, as guardianships were proposed for adults with disabilities who may need some significant help with decision making as adults, we were seeing folks being given de facto civics tests and poll tests to keep their right to vote, or having the right to vote removed without a conversation even happening, which is a pretty scary thing to think about, right? One of the things that we talked a lot about with legislators and in advocating for this bill is, how many folks do you know say, I always ask my wife who we're voting for, right? Or like, I always go by whatever so-and-so says. And this is very much a normal part of our culture. We rely on folks who we trust because we're not going to be experts in everything. But when someone with a developmental disability would do this, or someone with an aging related disability or other needs, we would say, well, then clearly they don't understand voting. They're relying on so-and-so. This isn't even a real vote. It's like, that's a weird double standard. And so we were so excited to see that protection put in place. It redefines in Virginia code what it means to have the capacity to vote. It ensures that voting rights and accommodations are specifically addressed in conversations in writing before they're removed. And there were some other good victories this year, but that one I've really been riding high on, and that we're hoping to see signed, like you said, by midnight tonight. No pressure.
No pressure. That's super exciting. I mean, that is really big deal. And the whole voting issue and access to voting and everything about accessibility is so critically important. I know you have a lot of advocates who join you in your work. You lead them, you bring them down to Richmond at least once a year, maybe more than that. How did that go for you this year? Do you have a great team of self-advocates who are really doing their thing?
Starting from your last question, my goodness, the powerhouse team we have in Northern Virginia of people with lived experience and those who love them, who are so willing to share their stories, is phenomenal. I will never stop being amazed by them. So as you mentioned, yep, this year we took our big old bus down to Richmond and we met with legislators in our newly revamped General Assembly building. We did something completely new this year that, in my mind, is the perfect example of how you can rethink things to make them accessible. And that is, we used to take a group of, I'll say, 50 folks down to Richmond once a year. We'd pack this bus in car drivers, and then I divide everyone into teams. And each team would have a leader that would take them from office to office. And if anyone else listening here has ever had the pleasure of visiting Virginia General Assembly while it's in session, it's a bit of a madhouse. You can wait 10 minutes for an elevator, especially if you're someone with a physical disability who is not walking those stairs, right? You can wait 20 minutes for an appointment that's 10 minutes long because the legislator's running behind from other meetings, right? And so these teams were given the impossible task of navigating the logistics of this day in this building and going from office to office. And this year, Northern Virginia delegation, I can't say enough about them, said, you know what we're seeing, ARC? We're seeing folks take up space in a conference room for an hour and having legislators come to them. You don't have to try and figure out how to get folks with wheelchairs and accessible needs in an elevator. We will come to you. You can introduce us around to your group. And I felt like the spirit in the room was high. It was exciting to have legislators come into a space that felt like our own, where we could put up our signage and we could welcome them. And it felt like a real partnership where they were literally meeting us halfway. We get to the building, you come to the office. And it was a really exciting way of doing it. And we do lots of kind of up in Northern Virginia town halls and virtual meetings and other kinds of things, because we know for anyone, especially our community, the realities of getting on a bus in Fairfax, Virginia at 6 a.m. and having an entire day to spend down in Richmond aren't there for everyone. So I think that day is powerful and important, but it's just got to be one beat in our drum beat because we've got to find ways to make sure every conversation with legislators is accessible to all. And I think we're doing a lot of expansion on that front.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's so exciting. I mean, your experience sounds very similar to ours at BIS. We also do our advocacy day at the State House, and we also get a room.
Yep.
Though we still are doing the traditional going, meeting to meeting, and we divide up. We bring our staff, we bring our people with lived experience, their families, anybody who wants to join us, which is great. And we partner with all of the brain injury service provider agencies across the Commonwealth, as well as Brain Injury Association of Virginia. So it's worked well for us too. But I like the fact that you are keeping it going throughout the year and not just a one and done, as they say, because advocacy doesn't just happen at one particular time of the year. We have to advocate for a lot of things throughout the year, and that visibility piece and telling stories is so important. We focus a lot on storytelling. I imagine you do as well.
Oh my goodness, yes. I bet I could spout off 10 statistics right now about the rate of people with disabilities without services and those who are incarcerated and those who are having challenges. But if I told one story about someone who had tried to vote and then had that right removed, even though their family petitioned to keep it because they used a communication device and the lawyer appointed to their case didn't know how to use the communication device. And as a result, they said, I don't think you have the capacity to vote. I can't understand you. And the family that hired a speech therapist to teach a lawyer how to use a letter board so that they could understand how this person was communicating. That's what we remember. That's what we walk away with. And I absolutely believe data is important. It should be a big driver of decisions, but it's when we hear those personal stories, I think that we're really called to action. We remember it and it crystallizes in our mind how important something is.
Could not have said that better. That is just spot on. I couldn't agree more. So let's talk about storytelling at another important level where we need to be advocating right now. I know the 800-pound gorilla right now is Medicaid, and that is high on your agenda at the ARC. So tell me a little bit about what you are doing in terms of protecting Medicaid, both, are you going to Capitol Hill? Are you working this in Virginia? I know Virginia's standing as strong as they possibly can right now to support Medicaid. I think that they understand the millions of people in the state of Virginia who see Medicaid as their lifeline. But talk to me about what that looks like for you all, and how you're addressing it, how we might join you in your efforts as well.
Feel like there's no wrong way to advocate right now. We're throwing everything at it. And as you were saying, the 800-pound gorilla, do you know what I thought? It's the 880 billion-pound gorilla, because that's what we're supposed to be cutting from the federal budget over the next 10 years. And the Congressional Budget Office has said there is no way to do that without impacting Medicaid services. You cannot find that amount of money without cutting what is already a program of last resort for people who are living in poverty continuously and people with significant disabilities. This isn't an area where we have a lot of space to give. So, on the federal level, we have an ARC US chapter based in DC. They have a fantastic full-time, year-round policy team. And so I feel like as a local chapter, our job is to listen to and support them. They are having a Hill Day on Wednesday, April 9th. We are sending advocates to go up and meet with them and talk with their congressional representatives. We are sharing around their action alerts, and we are really encouraging families to do exactly what you just talked about, Donna. Tell their personal Medicaid story to their congressional representatives. And there's no bad person to hear that story. If you feel like your congressional rep is already 100% on your side, they need those stories as their advocacy ammo in committee hearings, and as a reminder about why they're fighting this fight. And Virginia is a very purple state where people can certainly switch sides of the aisle. Votes can pivot on a tightrope there. So we want to make sure that we never take for granted the value of a single story or person reaching out. On the state level, as you mentioned, we've wrapped up General Assembly, but I think we're all fully expecting to be called back in, that there's going to have to be a special session as Virginia figures out how to navigate a new landscape without federal protections, not just for Medicaid, but the Department of Education and other basic disability rights and services as they seem to be yanked out from under us? Do we take federal law like the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and shove it into Virginia code and try and make it state law, right? I mean, we're going to have to figure this out as we go. And then we are also right now, this morning, I was having conversations about local budgets. This all ties together, right? So for every dollar of federal services that are removed, it's what can Virginia make up? What can localities make up? And with what they can't make up, how do we serve the people that we're here in government to support? Are people who most need us for services and supports. I think there's no question it's going to be a very active, ongoing dialogue as details at the federal level become more clear. And we all just keep putting one foot in front of the other or one wheel roll in front of the other as we navigate what to do next. So in terms of what to advise people to do, I mean, I'm saying sign up on every policy and advocacy listserv there is, respond to every 30-second action alert there is. There is power in numbers, and be ready. There will be marches. There will be testimony. There will be bigger hearings. And if you are the kind of person who's comfortable doing that level of share, reach out to me or folks like myself in various organizations and make sure they know that you want to speak. And my goodness, when we have reporters and politicians and folks reaching out to us who are actively, I bet 5 times in the last week, saying, tell me what's going on. I'm saying, you don't want to hear it from me. You want to hear it from people who are depending upon Medicaid to literally get out of bed tomorrow.
Again, brilliantly said. Thank you for all of that. I think we're all, quite nervous about what the impacts of this federal level, these cuts and these eliminations are going to mean for us in Virginia, especially as you noted, our proximity to DC and what that's going to look like. You jumped right into something else that I was going to address, which is the downsizing and potential complete elimination of the Department of Education and what that means for IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Do you have some specific messaging points that you're already working on about that?
I'll say eliminating the Department of Education is going to be litigated in our courts. Leaving that aside, it doesn't change the law. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and IDEA Amendments Act, those are still the law. It is still mandated that children with all scope and manner of disabilities are supported in inclusive school settings and have the services and supports they need to be successful. So if you are a person with lived experience, if you are their family and you are fighting with them, don't back off. This is not the time to say, then I guess everything's going away. This is the time to say, we're going to have to find another way to crack this nut and solve this problem, because the needs you and your loved one had yesterday are the same needs you had today. So you keep right on pushing for those services. I will later in this week when I have yet another special education meeting for my kiddos, right? We're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep fighting this fight. And as we figure out what this looks like, be talking to your local and state legislators about how they are going to make sure these fundamental rights are protected. We are all stronger together when we have kids with disabilities in safely, successfully inclusive classrooms. And we have conversations all the time that I don't know we necessarily connect the dots on, but do seem intuitive. Things like, we have a child in inclusive preschool, they're more likely to be in inclusive elementary school. Then they're more likely to graduate and want inclusive housing and inclusive work opportunities and inclusive volunteering opportunities. You are building a community for them. But for every child without a diagnosis in their classroom, you are raising the generation of police officers and HR managers and social workers and elected officials you want, who have seen what it's like to include people with disabilities and the power and importance of doing that for everyone. So don't back off. Keep mandating that inclusion that's there in the law and keep walking that walk every day. Show up to those inclusive settings and say, I have a right to be here.
Excellent, excellent. I want to turn the tables a little bit to help us understand a little bit more about some of the other programs that happen at the ARC of Northern Virginia. One that really speaks to my heart is your Transition Points program. Planning for the future is one of those things that I think many parents, siblings, they know it's something that they need to do, but they hesitate to figure out what to do. because it's a little bit scary. But tell us more about your work on that at the Arc of Northern Virginia and what our listeners might want to know about that program.
Sure. So the transition points being an acronym for providing opportunities, information, networking, and transition support, meaning we're going to help you figure it out. At all these phases of life, we carved life into 6 transition points, right? Early intervention, getting that diagnosis, navigating school, making the leap to the adult world, housing, employment, and aging. Knowing that all of these touch points, it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose as you are trying to take in all of the things you need to know. And a little bit comes from over here and a little over there in this program and that program. The idea behind transition points was let's put it all together. Let's say at this point in a lifespan, we'll write the honkin' big resource guide that'll walk you through with timelines, with checklists, with family friendly language, with contacts, with helpers, how to do things at this phase of life. And if you don't feel ready, ask us for help and we'll give a little more guidance. And if you get stuck, ask the ARC. There are answers at the ARC, right? Let's just keep making sure we're in touch with each other. So those 6 transition points resource guides that we wrote now 15 years ago morphed into how do we turn these into workshops and into one-page documents and into in-person support groups? And how do we translate that into 6 languages beyond English? And how do we make sure this information stays accessible? Because we want to make sure that at every age and every stage, people can find what they need. That's just impossible to navigate without a Sherpa of some sort. And I am so pleased to see that program continue to evolve as we look at hiring language and cultural literacy outreach experts for a variety of languages and cultures that we see present in Northern Virginia, and make sure that we keep those resources updated and keep those workshops coming. So the idea of transition points is it's this big umbrella. And no matter when you get that diagnosis or what you have going on, we've got some answers and a guide to walk you through.
That's fantastic. So for our listeners, are they able to find those materials on your website?
Absolutely. So if you go to the arcofnova.org, across the top, there's a ribbon style menu. And if you select programs, Transition Points is on there. And it'll bring up resources at every phase of life. But one of my other favorite resources is to go to resources and resource library. And there's an alphabetical menu where the transition points guides on, let's take a phase of life, aging out of school, will have the big forest of information. Here's everything you need to know. If opening that up at first seems overwhelming, you can go to the resource library and say, give me something just on applying for Medicaid for the first time. Give me something just on after school activities once the school bus stops coming and what life is going to look like for social and rec choices, right? So any way that you get information, we want to have answers ready for you.
Fabulous. I'm curious, is the trend, you said that Transition Points has been around for at least 15 years or so. So
Think about that.
that tells me it predates a project at the Arc of the US, which was on futures planning. But are
Yeah.
they connected in any way? Because sounds like they have a similar goal or connected goals.
I would say we are not the only ARC to figure out that this is a big gaping hole for families. So there is no wrong way to go about solving this. We have the advantage of being of and integrated with our local community. So our transition points resource guides are very specific to the contact name, number, and website for your Northern Virginia location to answer this question. I think the ARC of the US did a fantastic job creating these big sort of umbrella documents for folks who may not have a local ARC, may not have a local ARC who can develop this at a hyper local level, right? Who can at least give you the big picture and help guide you through things and give you a sense of all that there is out there. So I would say it works in tandem really nicely.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. That's great. I was on I guess the original committee to provide input on the Arc of the US's program. So
Thank you.
very exciting. Yeah, my pleasure, of course. So the last topic I want to bring up with you is related to technology. I know you also have a program called Technology for Independent Living. Independent living, of course, is key for people with all kinds of disabilities. It's what we're all here to support, is those life skills, opportunities. It means, independent living can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? But certainly being able to live in the community, access housing, school, work, all kinds of things, but I'd like to learn a little bit more about what the ARC is doing and what that might mean for our folks at Brain and Joy.
Absolutely. So this is, I always say they're our hippest team because it's true. They're so cool and innovative. Just an absolute powerhouse of folks who work through an app called ARC, the number 2, Independence. So working your way toward independence and independent living, as you mentioned. This program, I think, is easier to understand through examples. And it began as a program to be what I'll call a travel training coach in your pocket. So often, if folks with disabilities are learning how to use metro, bus, and rail to get from home to work, ultimately that travel trainer stops going with you for every trip, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean we're ready for nothing, for no support to help us on that journey. So the Arc to Independence app was originally designed to be, well, so what comes next? And can we take a picture of your bus stop and a Google Maps view of your path from your home to your bus, and a reminder and a picture of your bus driver, and a checklist that pops up that says, yep, I filled my Smart Trip card. Yep, I checked the balance. Yep, I went through the turnstile right. And then once I'm on that ride, here's my stop where I get off, right? How can I have digital prompts and supports to guide me through what I need to do, help me if I need help, and reward me through a video, stars, whatever it is that motivates this person as I get through this the right way. And over time, we realized, my goodness, it's not just it's not just travel trainers that fade away, it's job coaches. How can we adopt this to folks who are working on new jobs, new volunteer opportunities? And the example that I use, and this is such going to date me, but like I can't ever figure out the complex parts of our copier machine. So I would say, if you're going to be working in an office environment, we can take a video of you operating your copy machine at your office. So every time you go to do something, you can watch through it if you want. Or on office social skills and how long it's appropriate to work through weekend conversation, right? And then it morphed into daily living skills and safety skills and money management skills. And so that team has created something like 400 custom videos in the library that you can add for free to your Arctic Independence app. Or we can make one like I talked about that's completely customized to you with the voices, video, and photos of your home, job, life, commute, whatever you want. And so there are things in there like how to make microwave popcorn that if it works for you, great. And if you want us to do it with your brand of popcorn and your microwave, we're happy to do that too. And it's a great way for people with disabilities to have support in their pocket everywhere they go. And over the course of the time that I've been doing this work, we morphed away from the idea that people with disabilities had large, clunky, separate devices to everyone's got a smartphone or tablets or those kinds of things that we can use. And we look just like everyone else, getting our support to get through daily tasks.
Right.
And they do absolutely fantastic work.
Technology is for everyone, isn't it? And it's really been a game changer for people with all kinds of disabilities to help navigate communities. So thank you for your leadership in that body of work. As we start to come to a close here, looking ahead, what are your priorities? I know you've mentioned some, obviously, about protecting Medicaid, protecting IDEA, and education for kids with disabilities. What else is on your plate for this 2025 year, going into 2026, depending on when your fiscal year is? Did we miss any big points that you want to share with us about your priorities?
It feels like a lot of what we're focusing on for the rest of 2025 and what we know our partners are focusing on is what I'll call holding the line, right? Virginia, the country has come a long way in the last 40 years in serving people with disabilities, in creating programs and services and supports that are more accessible and forward thinking and get community inclusion to really be a part of the future for folks with disabilities. And so what we are going to be fighting on is any threat to that, any law that, for example, looks at making it hard to get identification that people with disabilities can take to the polls, we're going to fight it. Any threat to take away funding for education, we're going to fight it. And any programs that look at building back and expanding that support, we're going to be working for and providing voices that show how important those kinds of services and dollars are to the community and how they are wisely spent, not just on a human services front, but on a dollars and cents level. We know when people with disabilities have good services and supports, they work. their families can work, and we have communities where everyone is thriving. And that's a smart argument, no matter who you are.
Absolutely. So your final kind of, takeaway or that one-liner that you want all of our advocates, all of our individuals with lived experience, their family members, advocates, what's that one-liner you want them to always have in their head, ready to share with anyone?
Never forget the power of your own personal story. As a person with a disability, as a family member, you don't need to know the huge, big landscape out there and every talking point, but take every opportunity with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your legislators to share what public services, supports, accommodations do for you and your family, because you just never know who's listening and who's going to use that story as they cast a vote at the ballot box or in the halls of Congress. Don't stop telling your story. Don't stop responding to action alerts. It all adds up. You don't have to solve it on your own. We're stronger together.
Excellent. I think that lands us in such a great place, Lucy. Your passion, Lucy, for what you do and what you bring to individuals with lived experience and families and so many others is palpable. I can feel your energy, and I know everybody in Northern Virginia is feeling your energy, and we need that kind of leadership and energy right now, probably more than ever. So thank you so much for all that you are doing, and your CEO, Melissa Heifetz, is doing, and the whole team at the ARC of Northern Virginia. We are proud partners of what you do over at our perch just a little bit down the road at Brain Injury Services. We look forward to a continued partnership. And I want to thank you for joining me again today during Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month and Brain Injury Awareness Month. And we'll see you either at the State House or on the Hill or in Fairfax, Virginia soon.
We're everywhere. Right back at you, Donna, with big thanks for your passion and your advocacy and our partnerships.
Terrific. Thanks, Lucy.